Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare.
नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रसाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी निति नामिने। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर।
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare
Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yes. What time? Okay. That's what time? From what time to what time? 6 to 7. Okay, and then 7 o'clock is? Okay. What? Well, I didn't. Oh no. After what about after Gorati? What happens after Gorati?
Yeah, 7:30 onwards, we will be singing.
Okay, so Gorati is from 7 to 7:30. Okay, no problem. I didn't know. Sorry for that. कथा होगा
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Right now, we will now give Bhagavad Gita class. So we kindly welcome you to join and participate for the pleasure of Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda. carry on. Hare Krishna. Please come this way. Yeah. Hare Krishna. You can grab some cushions. This thing. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivardhari Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivraj Kacharya Stotra Shatra Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivraj Kacharya Stotra Shatra Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Ananta Kodi Vaishnavrinda Ki Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda Ki Shri Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman Ki Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Okay, so today we'll be speaking on Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, text 5. Does anybody need Bhagavad Gitas? Otherwise, you can get it on your phone as well. Do you want a Bhagavad Gita? Yes? Okay, try and get it. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Okay, so what we'll do, once you've pulled up the verse, we'll just do a call and response with the Sanskrit, and then we can do the same with the English translation. So I'll just chant the verse line by line, and then you can just repeat after me. Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha dvandvair vimukta sukha dukkha samgyair gacchantya mudha padam avyayam tat nirmana moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha dvandvair vimukta sukha dukkha samgyair gacchantya mudha padam avyayam tat. Would anybody like to recite the verse? Nirmana moha jita sanga dosha adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha dvandvair vimukta sukha dukkha samgyair gacchantya mudha padam avyayam tat. Okay, so going to the word, nihi. If you could just repeat the words after me, and then without, mana, false prestige, moha, and illusion, jitta, having conquered, sangha, of association, doshaha, the faults, adhyatma, in spiritual knowledge, nityaha, in eternity, vrinivritta, disassociated, kamaha, from lust, dvandve, from the dualities, vimuktaha, liberated, sukha dukkha, happiness and distress, samgye, named, gachanti, attain, amudha, unbewildered, padam, situation, avyayam, eternal, tat, that. So reading the translation, those who are free from false prestige, illusion and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. So we can just repeat that as well. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lust, who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. Okay, and then I'll just read the purport. The surrendering process is described here very nicely. The first qualification is that one should not be deluded by pride. Because the conditioned soul is puffed up, thinking himself the lord of material nature, it is very difficult for him to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should know by the cultivation of real knowledge that he is not lord of material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Lord. When one is free from delusion caused by pride, he can begin the process of surrender. For one who is always expecting some honor in this material world, it is not possible to surrender to the Supreme Person. Pride is due to illusion, for although one comes here, stays for a brief time, and then goes away, he has the foolish notion that he is the Lord of the world. He thus makes all things complicated, and he is always in trouble. The whole world moves under this impression. People are considering the land, this earth, to belong to human society, and they have divided the land under the false impression that they are the proprietors. One has to get out of this false notion that human society is the proprietor of this world. When one is freed from such a false notion, he becomes freed from all the false associations caused by familial, social, and national affections. These faulty associations bind one to this material world. After this stage, one has to develop spiritual knowledge. One has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own and what is actually not his own. And when one has an understanding of things as they are, he becomes free from all dual conceptions such as happiness and distress, pleasure and pain. He becomes full in knowledge, and then it is possible for him to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So before we begin sharing something, I'll just request the blessings of the previous acharyas, the teachers, who have passed this knowledge on to us. If you know the prayers, then feel free to join in. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So thank you all for joining today. So we're speaking on chapter 15, which is entitled The Yoga of the Supreme. Now, in the introduction of this chapter, Prabhupada writes that the ultimate purpose of Vedic knowledge is to detach oneself from the entanglement of the material world and to understand Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, if you tuned into the last few days of the Bhagavad Gita class, the first two verses, they describe the tree of material world, and it describes the complicated nature of this world. So it says that there's no end to the fruitive activities of this world, and it just entangles us further and further. So in one essence, the tree isn't really worth maintaining. And then the next two verses talk about how we can cut our attachment to this tree. So the attachment for sense enjoyment and lording it over the material world is very strong. So how can we break that? The last verse, which was discussed yesterday, speaks about how we have to cut it down with the axe of detachment. Now, the basic principle of devotional service is detachment from material activities. But at the same time, it's not just like you have to let go of things. There's also attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. So it's like the example that's given is, if a child is holding a knife, of course that's quite dangerous. So how would you get that knife out of that child? Any thoughts? Exactly. You find something to give it to them, like a lollipop or something, so that the child gets distracted, and then they will just let go of the knife automatically. But if you try to take that knife forcefully, then the child's going to scream, cry, the works. So it's always not just about detachment and letting go of things, but also what do we replace it with? So we have to learn detachment through two methods, which is outlined in this verse. Discussion of spiritual science based on authoritative scriptures, and we must also hear from persons who are actually in knowledge, because they are the ones who can help us to actually tread this path of material world. So now in this verse, it describes the results of actually cutting that tree of attachment. What are the processes and the results? So if we look at the verse itself, the first thing it talks about, nirmana, which is giving up false pride. So how would we define pride? Any thoughts? Everything about me, exactly. Yeah, I'm the center, isn't it? Any other thoughts? So pride is basically when I think I have some possession, as you rightly described, and I think this is the best thing for me. But if it's material, by definition it means it's temporary. And so if something is temporary, it means we can't really call it our own, because we're simply almost loaning it. But in today's day and world, we're so programmed through media, social media, everything around us to believe that actually, yes, I am the proprietor, I am the enjoyer, and the whole world revolves around me. Everything is me, as you highlighted. Take the example of the United Nations. You see the number of flags that are increasing outside the headquarters of the United Nations, just increasing and increasing, because Srila Prabhupada often said that the United Nations is not actually united, it's disunited. And the reason for that is because everyone thinks, I am the proprietor of this land. So many wars, even currently, are going on just because people think, no, I own this piece of land. But who are we really? In the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it describes that we are Atma. So Atma is described as being 1/10,000th the tip of a hair. So realistically, just think about the size of a hair. The tip of that hair is extremely small. You can't really get anything smaller than that. Now 1/10,000th the tip of that is basically the size of our Atma. So what are we really proud of? On top of that, so many of us are in illusion because, we think that this world is going to make me happy. So not only are we so minuscule, we're also in illusion. So what really do we have to be proud of? And whilst we expect honor, as he was saying in the Purport, we can't really surrender to Krishna if we think that we are supreme and thus expect honor all the time. So it prevents us from really understanding our position as servant of Krishna. So one may ask, where does this pride come from? So it's outlined that the pride comes from the desire to enjoy. So in order to be able to overcome that pride, we have to get rid of that desire to enjoy these things. So desire is to think that we need some object in this world to make us happy. Now that's really the definition of illusion. Because the illusion is that this material world is nice and we are the Lord, as I mentioned earlier. Recently, His Holiness Keshav Swami, he gave a morning class, Srimad Bhagavatam class, and one of the things he was highlighting was that in this world, the one lie, that is the biggest lie in this world, is anyone know? Did you hear the class? Okay. What do you think is the biggest lie in this world? I. Yeah. Yeah, it's very much aligned to that. Any other thoughts on what you think is the biggest lie that we're being sold today? I'm going to live forever, never going to die. So he actually said the biggest lie in this material world, and the thing is we all know this, but somehow we choose to ignore it. The biggest lie is that there is happiness to be found in material things. And this is a belief that permeates our every single day, that actually, these things that are in front of me are going to make me happy. But we also have to understand that happiness and distress will come on their own accord. So if you're really happy, just give it some time. You'll become distressed soon. It's the material world. This is guaranteed. And if you're in a situation of real distress, then just give it some time. There will be some happiness around the corner. So we don't have to make extra endeavor. Just like in second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna describes the happiness and distress come and go, just like the winter and summer seasons. Now, the next question you may ask, where do desires come from? So again, in this verse, Krishna outlines false association. So, jita sangha dosha. Sangha dosha means false association which is not favorable to us. So, that desire to enjoy independently of Krishna is basically the reason why this association is so dangerous, because everybody in this world wants to enjoy independently of Krishna. But then you may ask at the same time, then we all have this need to associate with somebody, like we need companionship, we need friends. And if everybody is in that same frame of mind that I want to enjoy, then what are we going to do? Because most people have that kind of mentality. So again, in this verse, Krishna again gives us the solution. He says that we have to understand the eternal. So what does that actually mean? Again, from second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, all the way up till now, which we're in the 15th chapter, Krishna outlined from the second chapter by starting to say that we are not this body. I am Atma, separate from the body. So, we have this conception in this material world that we're having a spiritual experience, by coming to the temple, practicing some kind of devotion, that we're having some kind of spiritual experience. But one philosopher stated, we're not actually human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. Now, why is that said? Because as a spirit soul, it's not that we only ever get a human birth. We can get a birth in 8.4 million species of life. So whether that's plants, animals, all sorts of living entities that we can take birth in. So as the Bhagavad Gita progresses up till now, in the middle section of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna outlines the best process of how we can understand that eternal. And that is through the process of bhakti yoga. So not only do we not need to become aware that we are Atma, but there is also a supreme Atma. It's described within our heart. Not only do we have, it's like two birds on a tree. One bird is eating the fruit and one is simply observing. So we are that bird that eating the fruits of our activities, and then there's the Paramatma that is observing everything that we do. And by worship of this Supreme Atma, that is called Bhakti. But what is spirituality? Because for so many people in this world, it's such a foreign concept. So Srila Prabhupada explained that spirituality is just about understanding and accepting the facts. So again, in the material sphere, the facts are basically what science gives us as the truth. But that's quite limited because we have material defects. So how can we understand the facts? Because in terms of what's actually the truth, it's not so common. For example, it is said, like there's a common saying that in this world, there are two things that are certain: death and taxes. But from a spiritual perspective, there's actually four things which are absolutely certain: birth, old age, disease, and death. These four things, by being in the material world, they're absolutely guaranteed for every single living entity. Shri Shri Radha Gokulananda Bhagwan ki, Shri Shri Sitaram Lakshman Bhagwan ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande Haribo. But no one wants to confront these facts about, there being birth, old age, disease, and death. For example, if we just take old age, the whole world celebrates birthdays when the birthday comes. But if you tell, a 30-year-old, are you 32? Are you 34? They'll get really offended because nobody wants to be older than they actually are. Even if you just say, are you 31? They still get so offended. It's like, no, I'm 30 and a half, So generally, nobody wants to become old age, wants to experience old age, but it's just the reality of this world. So how can we start to overcome these things on a practical level? So you may be familiar that on New Year's, a lot of people make resolutions, but those resolutions are supposed to kickstart something new, bring about some kind of change. Now, for Vaishnavas, Janmashtami, which is coming up tomorrow, it's a perfect day to make some kind of commitment to try and make a change for the betterment of ourselves. So it's a bit like a new year for us. And it gives us an opportunity to do something that will give us satisfaction and fulfillment in the coming year. But when you think about resolutions, there's a common conception that when we make New Year's resolutions, most people don't actually stick to them. So why is that? As the passage of time comes along, then you find that you're still in exactly the same place. Maybe you just moved very incrementally. But most people really struggle with resolutions. So I want to share some techniques that I feel can be quite helpful in terms of bringing about some positive change and lasting change. So there was a class that was happening in a school once upon a time, and the professor, he brought a jug into the classroom. So in that jug, he also had a bucket of stones, like they were fairly large stones. So what he did is put all the stones into the jar, as many as could fit into that jug, and then he asked the students, is this full? Can I get any more stones in there? And the students said, no, I don't think you can get any more stones. So then he removed another bucket, and it had smaller pebbles inside. So then he proceeded to put the smaller pebbles inside the jug, and then he asked the students, can I put anything more in there? And they thought, actually, no, all those small pebbles have filled all the gaps that were there in between the bigger stones. And then he asked them, is this full now? So they said, yeah, I can't see anything going further. Then he brought out a bucket of sand, which is even smaller. And then he proceeded to put all that sand that was there into the jug. And then it fitted all the small nooks and crannies in that jug. And then he asked the students, is this full now? And the students said, absolutely, I don't think you can fit anything further. He had one more trick up his sleeve. He proceeded to bring out a jug of water, and then he poured it into that bigger jar, and it basically filled it up completely. So any air gaps that were there between the sand, the water filled it there. And so then he finally asked, is it full? And they said, yes, absolutely. So what can we learn from this example? If you want to sit, you can take some cushions, unless you're comfortable. Yeah? Okay. So what can we learn from this example? Any realizations from that example? Anybody want to shout, share anything? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, very nice. So Mataji was saying that we have to make time and prioritize our Krishna consciousness, regardless of how busy our lives are. That's really nice. Thank you. So that, you've hit the nail on the head. Is that in the order in which we plan the activities of our day is extremely important, and it will allow us to achieve more in life. So the key lesson to learn there is that we have to identify the most important activities. Those are our biggest rocks. And then other activities can fill the space. Because if you started by filling that jar with water, could you put any sand without the water overspilling? No. If you were to add, the small pebbles on top of the water, no, everything would just spill out. So there's a huge lesson in there, in that if we take the biggest things in our life, prioritize that, start with those, and then find time for everything else, then we can achieve much more. The second thing I want to share with you is something called the time management matrix. So this is something that time management gurus came up with, and it's about splitting all the activities that we do in our daily lives into whether something is urgent or not urgent, and whether something is important or not important. So if you think of a diagram with 4 quadrants in it, you'll have one which is urgent and important. And then you'll have urgent, not important. Then you'll have not urgent and important. And then not urgent, not important. So amongst this, again, any thoughts about which one do you think is the most important out of those four? But out of those four quadrants, which is the most important? So should you do things which are urgent and important? Or should you do things which are non-urgent, important, non-urgent, non-important? Like, which ones do you think? Urgent and important. Right. Why do you think that is? You think you have to prioritize that? Okay. Any other thoughts? Yeah. So. So interestingly, actually, if we look at this from a spiritual perspective, even before we get to the spiritual angle, it is said that the place we really want all of our activities to be in is things which are important but not urgent. And that is something that is in the mode of goodness. So the one which most people thought is the one we should focus on is the urgent and important. This is where, everything just needs to be done. But what we tend to find in this quadrant is that you pile up activities over time, and then everything that you're doing is suddenly urgent and you never have time for anything else. So, you don't want to be in a place where you're just constantly going from one urgent thing to another urgent thing to another thing, and it's just like it doesn't give you any mental headspace. Whether that's any projects that we do for the temple or outside, for example, students. Let's take students for an example. If that student only revises when it's urgent, and obviously studying is important, do you think they have a higher chance of passing, or do you think they will do better when that student takes a longer time, when it's not as urgent to study, and then when the exams come, they will be able to have a better chance of passing? So this is why it's important to make sure that we're not just leaving things to the last minute and then things become urgent. This is the quadrant where we tend to find that people tend to postpone things like, I'll do it later, until the time comes when you just absolutely have to do it. And then you put yourself under so much stress. And you find that people who procrastinate a lot, this is the quadrant that they will be acting from as well. So if you look at it from a spiritual perspective, this is a sign of the mode of ignorance, tamagun. The third quadrant, which was urgent but non-important. So this is, again, a place where, we suddenly think that everything that we have on our plate, even if it's not urgent, I just have to do it now. So a couple of examples is people, like when there's a movie, for example, in the cinema, it's not really important, but we think, no, I have to watch it now. For example, another example is when the latest iPhone comes out, people queue up outside the stores from the night before just to make sure that they get their hands on that latest iPhone. But is it really that important? Is it going to drastically change your life? And what we learn from that is, this is where, at least in today's day and age, this is where most activities are in modern life, but they don't really add quality to our life because they're not that important. So even just a simple example is like our phones, someone's calling you. Half the time it's not really that urgent, but because you're impelled to look at it, whether it's a text message or email, whatever it is, it just draws us to respond urgently, but it's not really that important. And it's said from a spiritual perspective, this is what we classify in Rajogun, or mode of passion. So this is where everything becomes out of instinct. The fourth quadrant is things which are non-urgent and non-important. So this is where we're basically doing things just to waste time. Things like browsing social media, what you define as slacker activities. And these are activities that we should absolutely avoid because all they're doing is just making us more bewildered, more confused. We don't really know what to prioritize, and it's really just wasting time. So again, this is classified in the mode of ignorance. So where we really want to be, like I mentioned at the beginning, is things which are not urgent, but actually important for us to do. And I gave the example of studying where, if you do it over time, then you have less pressure on yourself when you actually have to sit the exams. So in this quadrant, it requires a lot of careful planning and execution, and you define this quadrant as doing the right activities at the right time. And from a spiritual perspective, this is what you'd classify as the mode of goodness. So these are some tips of how we can, become into that stage of not being under false prestige, not being under illusion. Because if we focus on the things which are absolutely most important, and if it's said that the morning hours are absolutely conducive to any kind of spiritual activity. So if we start our day with spiritual activities, whether that's some kind of meditation, some yoga, some japa, some reading, it is said that is the time. If we make those our big stones into our jar, then everything else can fit around it, and we find our days will go much, much better. So I'll summarize here. We discussed the tree of this material world, which is the theme of this chapter, and how in the previous verses it was described that we can cut this tree of this material world by using the weapon of detachment. But detachment is only half the picture, because, as I mentioned, of the example that if a child has a knife, the way to get rid of that knife from the child's hand is by giving it something else. And so that involves attachment to the Supreme Person. So the qualities that we need to develop are becoming free from false prestige, free from false illusion, from false association, being done with material lust, recognizing that happiness and distress will just come out of their own accord, and understanding the eternal. And how can we understand the eternal? Is through the practice of bhakti yoga. And then I gave some practical tips about how we can move away from quadrants where things are not, things appear urgent but they're not important, or they're just not urgent, not important. And those are the things which are in the modes of ignorance and passion. And we have to rise to the mode of goodness, which is making sure that we plan things carefully, do things in a calculated way, and achieve a better result. This way, when time comes, it won't just pass us by. And if we make a resolution tomorrow for Janmashtami, we can, using these techniques, we can make sure that they're more longer lasting, and we can actually experience some transformation. So I'll stop here and just ask if anybody had any questions or comments. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's the illusion. We think these things are going to make us happy. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, time and time again. I mean, even there was this quote by Jim Carrey. He said, "I wish everybody got exactly what they were hoping for and prayed for, because then they would realize, actually, this doesn't really make me happy." And Steve Jobs, just before passing away, he said something very similar, that, people need to realize that these things aren't going to make anyone happy. So it's just about keeping that in mind. And then, like I said, it's not just about detachment, but what do we do instead of looking for these happiness in these things that we're so commonly used to. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So your question is, some days we have really down days, some days we have up days. And on those down days, how can we lift ourselves up? So first of all, let me ask that question back to you. Do you have any thoughts on ways we can uplift ourselves? Yeah. 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 Yeah, so I really liked the first thing which you mentioned, which is, just reflecting on some of the good things that we have in our lives. And that's akin to gratitude. And And it is said that gratitude is the soil in which all other qualities grow from. So that's a really nice practice. But in spite of that, sometimes, even from reflecting on the blessings that we have in our lives, we still end up having days which are just quite negative. I think in this verse there's one clue in which something that can really help us, and that is association. So what you'll find is those times when you feel really down, you'll just be by yourself. Like it's said, when you're by yourself, it's like the mind is a devil's workshop. You may have heard of that saying. I don't mind, yes. So when we're not engaged, when we're not engaging our mind properly, then it starts to run amok. And that's really kind of the first step of things just going downhill. So that's why association is really, really important. And aside from the cliche, it's just about making sure that we're surrounding ourselves with people who can uplift us. Because one of the things that was mentioned in this verse is that desires, they come from association. So if we're finding that we have these very material desires, we have to ask ourselves, who am I surrounding myself with? But at the same time, if we, like visiting the temple, spending some time with people who can uplift you, over time, you'll find that those down days just reduce and reduce. Of course, some things may still be there, but Srila Prabhupada gave this example of a fan, that even when people start practicing bhakti, it's not that all of our bad karma just suddenly drops away. The example he gave is of a fan. So, if you've got a fan just whirling, if you stop it, it takes a little while before it comes to a complete stop. So like that, even though we press the stop button on our material desires, some results will still come. And we may experience some negative days, but over time, through the practice of bhakti and making sure that we're surrounded by people who can uplift us, then those days will just gradually reduce until they will diminish completely. So hopefully that helps. Thank you for your question. Any other questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Darshan will be at 7 o'clock and Gora Arti. So please stay and take darshan of their lordships. Hare Krishna.
Early? So let me sing for 10 minutes.
Yeah, please go.
How are you, Prabhu? It's good to see you. Long time. Yeah, I know. Adharam madhuram adharam madhuram Vadanam madhuram Nayanam madhuram Hasitam madhuram Adharam madhuram Vadanam madhuram Nayanam मधुरं हसितं मधुरं हृदयं मधुरं गमनं मधुरम् मधुराधिपते अखिलं मधुरं मधुरा हो मधुरा वचनं मधुरं चरितं मधुरं वसनं मधुरं वलितं मधुरं चलितं मधुरं भ्रमितं मधुरम् मधुराधिपते अखिलं मधुरं मधुरा ओ मधुरा अरे वेणुर्मधुरो रेणुर्मधुरः पाणिर्मधुरो पादो मधुरो नृत्यं मधुरं साख्यं मधुरम् मधुराधिपते अखिलं मधुरं मधुरा हो मधुरा गीतं मधुरं पीतं मधुरं भुक्तं मधुरं शुप्तं मधुरं रूपं मधुरं तिलकमधुरं मधुराधिपते अखिलं मधुरं मधुरा हो मधुरा हो करणं मधुरं तरणं मधुरं हरणं मधुरं रमणं मधुरं वमितं मधुरं शमितं मधुरं वमितं मधुरं शमितं मधुरं मधुराधिपते अखिलं मधुरं मधुरा हो मधुरा गुंजा मधुरा माला मधुरा गुंजा मधुरा माला मधुरा यमुना मधुरा विची मधुरा सलिलं मधुरं कमलं मधुरं मधुराधिपते अखिलं मधुरं मधुरा हो मधुरा हो मधुरा अरे गोपी मधुरा लीला मधुरा युक्तं मधुरं मुक्तं मधुरं रेष्टं मधुरं श्रेष्ठं मधुरं मधुराधिपते अखिलं मधुरं मधुरा ओ मधुरा गोपा मधुरा गावो मधुरा यष्टि मधुरा सृष्टिर्मधुरा दलितं मधुरं फलितं मधुरं मधुरा ओ मधुरा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। साथ गाएंगे सब। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 बोलिए। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम राम। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम राम। हाउ आर यू फ्रॉम? आज नहीं
जामल से बाद उसको गया वो जामल
रथ यात्रा के लिए अगले साल। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 बोलिएगा। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे राम राम राम। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम राम। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। श्री राधा गोकुलानंद भगवान की जय। सीताराम लक्ष्मण हनुमान की जय। श्री गौर निताय की जय।
কি বজয় জয় গৌরা চাঁদের आरती का शोभा की बजयो जयो गौरा चांदेर आरती का शोभा जहन भी तट बने जगमन लोभा जान भी तट बने जगमन लोभा कि बदखिननी ताई चान बाम गदा धार दखिन निकटे अद्वैत श्रीने बास छत्रधार निकटे अद्वैत श्रीने कि बबशी आছেন গৌরা চাঁদ রত্ন সিংহাসনে आरती करेन ब्रह्मा आदि देव गणे आरती करेन कि बनर हरि आदि करी चामर डुलाय
के नहीं बजाओ
संजया मुकुंडा बासो घोषयादि गायो संजया मुकुंडा बासो घोषयादि कि बशंख बाजे घंटा बाजे बाजे करो तालो शंख बाजे घंटा बाजे बाजे करो मधुर मृदंग बाजे परमर শালো মধুর মৃদঙ্গ বাজে কিবা শিব সুখ নারদ প্রেমে গদ গদ কিবা
কি ব্যাপার বাজাবে না where are you going
ভক্তি বিনোদ দেখে গৌরার সম্পদ ভক্তি বিনোদ দেখে গৌরার সম্পদ जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य। रे माता जी हरि बोल। माता जी ताल में नहीं मिल रहा। 1 2 3 1 2 3। हरे हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। बोलेगा हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। बोलो हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। बोलो हरे कृष्ण हरे हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे। अरे सुनाई नहीं दे रहा भाई साहब। हरे राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे बोलिए भाई हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 अरे पीछे वाले हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण गोविंद जय जय गोपाल जय जय गोविंद जय जय गोविंद जय जय गोपाल जय जय गोविंद जय जय गोपाल जय जय गोविंद जय जय राधारमण हरि गोविंद जय जय राधारमण हरि जय जय राधारमण हरि गोविंद जय जय राधारमण हरि गोविंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे राम 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 बोलो हरे राम राम हाँ हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे राम 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 हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे राम हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण कितने दिन हो आप कितने दिन हो यहाँ
मैं आज ही हूँ जा रहा हूँ
आज जा रहे हैं टोरंटो
टोरंटो जा रहा हूँ संडे शादी है
टोरंटो में
मई में नया मंदिर खोलना है आपको बुलाना है आपका नंबर चाहिए
हाँ हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण हाँ हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण कृष्ण अरे बोलो भाई हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे गोविंद बोलो हरि गोपाल बोलो गोविंद बोलो हरि गोपाल बोलो गोविंद राधारमण हरि गोविंद बोलो राधा जय जय राधारमण हरि गोविंद बोलो गोविंद जय जय गोपाल जय जय गोविंद जय जय राधारमण हरि गोविंद जय जय राधारमण हरि गोविंद जय जय राधारमण हरि गोविंद बोलो हरि गोपाल बोलो गोविंद बोलो राधारमण हरि गोविंद बोलो राधारमण हरि गोविंद बोलो हरि गोविंद राधारमण हरि गोविंद बोलो, राधारमण हरि गोविंद बोलो, राधा। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे राम राम राम। हरे कृष्ण कृष्ण हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल। निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल। जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय प्रभुपाद। जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय प्रभुपाद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे रामा राम राम हरे हरे। बोलो हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे।
प्रभु हरि बोल साउंड একটু বাড়াও না, শুনতে পাচ্ছি না, একটু বাড়াও।
हाँ बैठिए बैठिए, थोड़ा नरसिंह प्रेयर करेंगे अभी भगवान नरसिंह देव का। नमस्ते नरसिंहाय नामस्ते नर प्रहलाद लाद दायिने प्रहलाद हिरण्य कश्यपूर्वक्षः हिरण्य श्रीलटङ्कानखालाय श्रीलटङ्कानखालाय इतो नरसिंहो परतो नरसिंहो इतो नरसिंहो परतो यतो यतो यामिततो नरसिंहो यतो यतो यामिततो बाएर नरसिंहो हृदय नरसिंहो बाएर नरसिंहो हृदय नरसिंहो नरसिंहामदिं शरणं प्रपद्ये नरसिंहामदिं शरणं तव कर कमलवरे नखम् अद्भुत श्रृंगार दालिता हिरण्यकशिपुर तनुभृंगा केशवधृत नरहरि रूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे तव कर कमलवरे नखा अद्भुत श्रृंगार दलिता हिरण्यकशिपो तनुभृंगा केशवधृत नरहरि रूपा जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय जगदीश हरे जय नरसिंहदेव 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 जय नरसिंहदेव जय भक्त प्रहलाद भक्त प्रहलाद भक्त प्रहलाद जय भक्त प्रहलाद निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल। श्री श्री नृसिंहदेव भगवान की जय। भक्त महाराज प्रहलाद की जय। समवेद भक्त वृंद की जय। निताय गौर प्रेमानंद हरि हरि। अरे वाह बहुत हाँ मेरा नंबर ले लो।
हाँ कार्ड है आपका? पहले दीजिए आपके।
अरे वाह प्रभु आप दिल खुश कर देते हो बस। नंबर ले लीजिए।
तो मई में खोल रहे हैं मंदिर हम।
आप कौन सा मंदिर खोल रहे हैं?
नया मंदिर खोल कर मैं डोनेट कर रहा हूँ इस्कॉन को।
अच्छा कहाँ पे है?
टोरंटो से 2 घंटे।
अच्छा
मेरे फादर बोल गए थे जाने से पहले।
अच्छा
कनाडा में मंदिर खोलना
वहीं पे।
हाँ वहाँ पर मंदिर खोलेंगे और रहने के लिए आपको क्वार्टर मिलेगा। फ्लैट बना रहा हूँ गेस्ट क्वार्टर उसमें रहना।
वाह।
और मंदिर ओपनिंग होगी 18 को और फिर रथ यात्रा करेंगे बहुत बड़ी।
ये मई में नेक्स्ट ईयर।
हाँ मई 20
नेक्स्ट ईयर।
तो गोपाल कृष्ण महाराज जी आएंगे। आए थे लास्ट वीक 2 वीक पहले। तो उनसे बात हुई थी तो बोले आएंगे हम।
टेक्सास गया आज
हाँ प्रभु
एयरपोर्ट
बाबा
से
वहाँ पे
बात हुई।
ऑस्टन
ऑस्टन में
मेरे को एक
उसके बाद
व्हाट्सएप में में व्हाट्सएप पे उसका नंबर
सुरनाम नेक्स्ट वीक सुरनाम जा रहे हैं।
जा रहे हैं क्या
हाँ।
पिताजी का तो पता है आपको हर जगह जाते रहते हैं
तो जर्मनी से आए 2 वीक पहले। तो मैंने 9 को हम दिवाली परेड निकाल रहे हैं।
अच्छा।
लीड कीर्तन
अच्छा।
करने वाले हैं। He will do the कीर्तन और 3000 आदमी होगा 9 अक्टूबर को नेक्स्ट मंथ। मिलते हैं।
ठीक है प्रभु बहुत धन्यवाद थैंक यू ओके देखते हैं राग बागेश्वरी -3